Today is Thursday, October 7th, 2010. We are interviewing Paul Hifko. The videographer will be Gary Miglio. The coordinator will be Ann Bartlett. And the interviewer will be Pat Perlinsky. Paul, can you tell us when you were born, where you were born, and something about your early life?
Okay, I was born in a small town, Barton, Ohio. Not too far from the Ohio River. And I lived there till I was about 18. Then I went to the Civilian Conservation Corps. I spent 2 years up in the Bear Paw Mountains of Montana. We were fixing the state park up there. Put in 52-mile fence line. And I got on the survey crew and I liked it, and so I stayed 2 years. That was the limit. Then I went home and I got a job at the coal company store, and I worked there up until I was drafted, and that was in 1941, and that's where my Army life began. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for my basic training, and from there I went on to World War II.
After your basic training, did you have any special training? You were in the engineering corps?
No special training. It was just regular basic engineer training, yeah. Just like the others, we had explosives and bridge buildings, pontoon bridges, and whatever else, you know.
Did you have a chance to come home for furlough or leave?
Yes, I did. I came home on a 72-hour pass, and I had a telegram waiting for me to report back immediately, repeat immediately, and I had to go back to Pass Christian, Mississippi. And we got a board truck and then a train, and wound up at Fort Dix, New Jersey.
And you retained the rest of the outfit there, and then you were proceeded to go overseas?
Yeah, but we waited there for, I think it was about, it had to be about a month we were in Fort Dix. And we didn't know the reason, but we found out later as they took us through railroad yards and on the ferry boat to New York, and when we got to the pier where the boat was docked, they said the one boat there, they said, is the one that we were supposed to go on, but they had a fire, and so it was, they were renovating the boat, and the other one was alongside of it, and it was the Queen Elizabeth, and the one that was on fire was the Normandy, and that's the reason we were delayed at Fort Dix, because Normandy caught on fire, and so we had to wait. But we got aboard the ship, and we took off without an escort, went past the Statue of Liberty, and one of the officers called out, and he says, "Okay, man, come take a good look." Says, "You may never see this again." So we...
Now, what year was this?
This was in 1942.
Okay, so...
May of 1942. And we went up the East Coast, up to Newfoundland with an escort, and from Newfoundland on out, we did not have an escort. We took the northern route because they said the submarines did not like to operate in the cold water. Their batteries wouldn't last very long, and it was too cold. And so we were on the gun crew, a couple of us were, and mostly I was up on deck. And they told us that don't get too close to the railing, because any man overboard is, or we're not stopping. Said we're not going to risk the life of the other people. So there was one that went overboard. A man overboard, And I looked over and I could see just a dark blob bobbing up and down. Yeah, and there was one periscope that came up. And evidently, it either a friendly sub or whatever, because it went back down and we proceeded without any problem. We didn't have any escort. But we zigzagged every 5 minutes. We changed course, so the submarine could not get a good shot at us. Yeah. So anyway, we found out from the gunnery sergeant. He was a British Marine sergeant. He told us that there were 22,000 of us aboard ship. That's an awful lot of people. 22,000. And we were crammed in there like sardines. We had breakfast sometime at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we would have dinner at 3, and that was 2 meals a day. But it only took us 4.5 days to cross. And we landed in Greenock, Scotland, and the sun was shining bright, and it was 11 o'clock. And we thought it was noon, but it was past, it was already near midnight, 11 o'clock, and the sun was shining. And we were greeted by some of the officers of the British Army. So they inspected our clothing and our rifles and all to see what we had. And from there we went down to the Midlands of England, down to Birmingham and Coventry that was bombed so severely. And we stayed at Litchfield Barracks for I think about 2 weeks or so. And our first inspection was by General Eisenhower. And I happened to be the one that he come up to and asked where I was from. So I got to talk to General Eisenhower. Yeah. And outside of that, it wasn't so different, except at 12 o'clock midnight, the sun was still shining. And they had daylight saving and wartime too, so I don't know how that went along, but it was, sun was shining at 12 o'clock, yeah. So it was kind of extraordinary. And from there, we went down to what they called Foxhole. I don't know just exactly where that was, but we had to run in pipeline. We were going to build a big bomber air base there. And so we got started, and we stayed there about 5 months till October, and got to go into London a few times, and that was quite an adventure. But then we got word we're leaving, so packed up, and we wound up in Bristol, Wales, I think it was. Bristol, Wales. Started to load ship, and from there we sailed up the Irish Sea at midnight, and we headed for New York. Our gunnery sergeant told us there's one more day and we're going to be in New York. But all of a sudden we turned south and we met the big convoy coming from the States, and we went into Africa with the convoy from the States. So that's where we went through the Strait of Gibraltar and over to our landing area. We landed in Arzew, Algeria. And we were scheduled to go off board ship. We were all lined up to disembark, and there was a colonel. He came up to our major and he says, we're the ones that are going off first. And the major says, no, my orders read that we're to be first wave, first echelon. And so the colonel says, well, he says, you're a graduate of West Point, aren't you? And he said, yes. So he says, well, he says, you know, he says, I outrank you, and he says, we're going off first. They were infantry. So they went off first, and they run into an ambush. No. The French Foreign Legion got them. And I forget just exactly how many the officers and soldiers that were left. There weren't too many, yeah. So we got off pretty easy there, because when we got off, they scattered, yeah. And that was our first landing. And from there, we just went on, I forget where, some outfit. And we were the only troops that were between the supplies, where the supplies were being loaded off, and the enemy. And the one day, it was, I think about the second day that we were there, that we had planes come over to strafe us. They came from the west, and they headed north, strafing, turned around, came back, and as they come back, the one, he veered off over to the right a little bit, and he started to go up. He started gain altitude, and I had my rifle, and so I had the pilot right in my sights, and something told me, says, "No, Paul." So I shot into the engine instead of the pilot. And thing was that they were American pilots. They were flying Spitfires, the British fighter plane. And so one of them crashed. I don't know whether it was the one that I emptied my clip into or not, but I couldn't miss, because he wasn't any further than from here, the wing spread of the small fighter plane. And I emptied my clip into his engine. So I never did know just who brought him down, but he was an American major. Yeah. And they were told that the enemy had overtaken our positions, and so they came by strafing. Yeah.
So that was friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire. And so that was our first big event there. And then there was a tank coming in, enemy tank. So of course we had to get one platoon, and I was in the platoon. We had to go up and stop the tank. So we got up partway, and here come one of the small tanks that we had. And the tank commander says, "Okay, man, you can go back, we'll take care of it." So we turned back. And as we turned back, we got back to our outfit, and there was a major there who says, "Well, we need some people to go and help us take the air base down near Oran." And that was 20 miles, about 19 or 20 miles from where we were. So we said, well, we didn't even have any rations or anything. So he said, "We'll get you the rations." So he came back, he had a Jeep full of rations. And we each got our daily supply of food. And we started out for the air base near Oran, 19 miles. And we didn't have, that had to be about the third day, because we were without water. And we met one of the half-tracks that was coming back, and they gave us some of their water, but all of us didn't get water. So we had to get pebbles from the ground, and we cleaned them, you know, and cleaned them up, spit on them a little bit, cleaned them up, and put them in our mouth, and we just kind of, it made saliva in your mouth, so it kept you from getting too dry, yeah. So we got back, we got over to where the air base was, and all that, the only thing had to be done was the mopping up. And there again, we had the tanks come in. I guess it was Patton and his men. He got up and he says, "Okay, man," says "we'll take over. They're on the run." Says they're heading for the mountains. So says you can take a break. And that was our first big major offensive there, yeah. So took a break, and we were standing, we had a little can burning with, we put sand and a little bit of the gasoline and a sea ration can. We had a little fire going there, and somebody put up a pup tent, and we heard a groan. So what happens, you know, one of the guys around the fire, which I was around too, this one guy yelled, "Die, USOB, die," you know, he groaned. And there was a rifle shot. So then somebody said, "Well, you better go over and check. Maybe the guy had got trouble." Went over there, and here he tied a shoelace on the trigger of the rifle and put the rifle in his mouth, and with his big toe he pulled the trigger, shot himself. Yep.
Where did you go from there?
From there we had to stay because the only submarine that the French Vichy government had sunk the ship that our equipment was on. So we had to stick around Oran for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or maybe a month. I don't remember exactly. But we had, I think, about 3 or 4 different loads of equipment that were sunk while we were overseas. So we lost our equipment, and we had to stay there to maintain the air base for a while. And then they went ahead and sent us off to different towns and different airfields to defend against paratroopers and all. So while we were waiting for the equipment, and then we took off. And I don't really know the you know, some of the towns, because we really didn't get into a lot of the towns after that. We scraped out air bases, you know, from the vineyards or whatever they had, and fighter air bases. So towns didn't mean so much. You could see a name of a town here or there, but it was hard to really come by towns, yeah. I really don't know. And some of the areas we came into were right at the edge of the Sahara Desert, you know. And like I said, we were all scattered all the time. So it was hard to see. But there at Oran, we stayed there a while. And they used to have a gathering of people right outside of the city of Oran, the wall of the city. And we never could get over there, you know, to find out what was going on. It was off limits to us. And we finally found out that that's where they had the slave market. They were selling and buying people over there, yeah. And that was in 42, yeah. So from there we went to, I don't know, I don't remember the name of the town. No, it wasn't Orleansville, I don't know. But anyway, we went to this one town, and we were there for Thanksgiving. And so somebody said we should be able to get some chickens somewhere. And so the one fellow found out that he could get to talk to the mayor, and he spoke French. So he talked to the mayor, and the mayor told him where to go to get some chickens. The mayor had sold his daughter to one of the Arabs, and he was living outside of town, and he had that little farm there, or whatever you want to call it, and we got a few chickens for Thanksgiving, yeah. And I can't remember the name of the town. I don't know. Yeah. I still have a picture of a couple of his daughters, the mayor's. He invited us over to his house for dinner. Just, I think 3 of us went to dinner there while we were waiting for our equipment. And then we took off and went different directions. Some places we would go, and I know the one field they had to pick up 1,500 landmines they had to clear in order to make an airstrip for the fighters. Yeah.
Then from there on, you went to the rest of Africa before you went to Anzio and the invasion of Sicily?
Oh, yeah. We went all the way through Africa, all the way up to Cape Bon, and that's where we had staging area right outside of Tunis, And like I said, we came back to Arzu for invasion training, and then we went back to the outfit. They had a few different gadgets to put on vehicles, you know, so they could be, so they could go through the water without stalling and all. So we had to go down there for it, and they were all in suntans, and we were in khakis because we never were issued suntan clothing. We always had to wear our khaki clothes, yeah. Even as hot as it got, and it got up. I think one time one of the guys said it was 130 degrees. We had, I think they called it the Sirocco wind that was blowing, the dust and the sand, and we still patting. We had to wear our ties, and we had to be all buttoned up and everything. That was his orders, yeah. So they couldn't get over the fact that we didn't have suntans, and they were all in sun. So what are you guys doing? Where are you from? You know. So we told him, and said, why haven't you got suntans on? And we didn't have any suntans. And whenever we were with the British Army, you know, we always they always had shorts and suntans and everything, and we felt so out of place, you know. And you know what the British had? Whenever we came up to them, they would have little signs, just like a little T, you know, just about so high, and it would say on the top, "When in doubt, stop and brew up." Yeah. So that always, but we were always pretty happy to be with the British Army because it was a change of rations that we had, you know. We always had sea rations, and they would have their rations, so we got their ration. And the first thing that we knew, we got oxtail soup, which we didn't even hear of before, you know, oxtail soup, but it was good. Yeah, oxtail soup and bully beef, yeah, it was really great. And we were with the American First Army, and oh God, I don't know, American First Cavalry, but most of the time we were with the American Third Division. So, and we never, our ordnance outfit never did catch up to us until we were up near Leghorn. And they said they always wondered if we were just a ghostly outfit or whatever it was, because we'd never come to them for any food or parts or anything, you know. So, you know, and our worst part was up at Anzio when we went around Monte Cassino. Stayed there for 6 months, from January until July. And we were under fire day and night. And they were sitting up on the mountains with their 88s, and we were down in the flatlands. Yeah. So they had us pretty well zeroed in. Any move you made, you know, if they wanted to, they could pick you off. And I had a shell. It hit. We were in a hole there. We had a little cover over it, and we were. This one morning, they really had a lot of pressure on us. So they tried to get us off this. I think it was 3 days. They threw everything they had, planes, and they even had a railroad gun that they rolled out and used, and all the 88s that they had up in the mountains. And I don't know how true that was, but we got a trench line bulletin, and it sounded to me like they might have made a mistake, because they said in that 124-hour period, we had 72 air raids. And we knew we had a lot, because just as soon as one group would go over, you know, with the horizon, here come another group. So that happened 3 days and 3 nights like that, yeah. And that's where we lost our first sergeant. He lost it there, yeah. Mm-hmm. He just couldn't take it anymore. Yeah, he was kneeling up against a tree there, and he had a pair of rosaries out, and he called me over. He says, "Come here, Paul." He says, "We've had it." And I says, "No, we're okay." He says, "No." He says, "We can't get off." but they sent him back, yeah. And he was regular Army. I thought he was, you know, strong enough to hold up, but I guess he just couldn't make it. And we were in an area, they had what we call a vet check Charlie. He used to come over every night or every evening, just about dusk, and he would look for targets, someplace to bomb. And if we opened up on him when he first come in, he would unload right where he first had a chance, and then he would strafe the hospital on his way out. So, and that was every evening, bed check Charlie, yeah. And we had this one fella, his older brother was in our outfit. The younger brother was in the infantry. And when we were in Africa, he had his brother transferred into our outfit. He says, I can look after him and probably help him. So he had him transferred in. Well, at Anzio, he had part of his foot that was shot off or blown off, I don't know which. But he was in the hospital. And the planes came over and they dropped their bombs, and they were leaving, so they start strafing the hospital. And the older brother laid on top of the younger brother, and he got killed while he was laying on his brother, yeah, trying to protect him, you know. And so it was things like that happened, yeah. And the one time we had the artillery open up, and they had a little spotter plane, a Piper Cub, and he was giving them directions where to shoot. And they fired one shot and they hit the plane, brought the plane down. Yeah, things like that. And another time, there was a plane came over, and it was, it looked like a B-24 art plane. So a lot of our fellas start cheering. And I told them, I says, hey, wait a minute. I says, you better take cover. I said, that's not our plane, I don't think. I says, I can't see it being our plane. And here, it was a German plane that resembled our B-24. And it got back away from the beachhead, and there was a flash from looked like the bomb bay underneath, and it must have been a smart bomb. And a lot of the ships were out there in the bay, and it hit an ammunition ship. So a lot of the ammunition started exploding, and the sailors all started abandoning ship. And the shoreline was mined, and they run into the mines, and then you heard a lot of screaming. So there was a brand new ship that the British Navy had. I don't remember whether it was a destroyer or a cruiser, but it was one of the larger ships, a brand new one, just only been in service 6 months. So they went ahead and they got a tow line onto that ammunition ship to pull it out, and just as they started pulling it out, the whole ship exploded, and it capsized that cruiser or destroyer or whatever it was. Yeah. So it was things like that. And one day, there was a plane come over, and it looked like a P38, a twin fuselage, you know. And so they called up, the anti-aircraft called up and wanted his IFF, that was identify friend or foe, and they couldn't get any response from him. So they figured they'd fire a warning shot. Fired one shot and they brought him right down. All he found is a one boot from his foot. That's, you know, and it was one of our P38. The guy probably didn't have his radio on, didn't hear, you know, for identification, and it brought him down. It was just things like that happened, yeah. Yeah. So we stayed there, and we had the one Ranger outfit that was there. They lost all but 15 men. That's all they had left out of their outfit. 15 men. They lost every one of them trying to break through. Yeah. And General Clark thought it would be good tank area, you know, because it was level, and he thought, hey, level ground, we could get our tanks in there and we could get right through. Couldn't do it. It used to be marshland, so it was sandy and soft earth, and wherever the shells hit, they made a big hole. And like I said, that one night, or one morning at dawn, they start shelling. And because they had a pretty good firefight going on, and some of the guys were right there by our foxhole, and they're smoking cigarettes, and you could see everything. I mean, they're up on the mountain. And so that morning at dawn, they started firing. Well, I was tired, and because it was going on for about 3 days already. And my buddy said he poked me in the ribs and says, he says, Paul, you hear that? That's what he was telling me. And said, I just groaned and rolled over. And when it was all over with, he says, let's stick your head out, take a look. And there were shell holes all around. And one of them was a hole about like from here to the top of that chair right there. And it was a dud. Yeah, had it gone off, I wouldn't be here today. Yeah, so. And when we were going into Anzio, we were picked out by 2 of the dive bombers. It was early in the morning, the sun had just come up, and they were coming up out of the sun. We were on a British ship, and the British commander, he had already had one ship torpedoed and another ship that had been destroyed by dive bombers. So he was pretty well trained on that. So he told his men, we weren't on the gun crew there, he had his own gun crew, and he told them, he says, they're coming out of the sun. He says, just keep your eye on them, don't fire till I give you the word. And so they came within range. He says, okay, open fire. And they were both coming in together, and they split. And one on one side of the ship, one on him. But they just did miss us, so we got all covered up by all that oily water and everything else. But I don't know if anybody getting hit that day. That's when we were going into Anzio, yeah. So that was our worst part of it. But most of the time, we had mines to take care of, or explosives to do, whatever, you know. And like I said, I don't know what a lot of the other groups had to do, you know. So I only know what A Company had to do, and I have, on my campaign ribbon, I have 5 little stars, but instead of the 5, I got an arrowhead and 2 stars, so that's 7 stars for the campaigns, yeah. So, and we get when I was home, I think it was recuperation period, or after I was discharged, we get the presidential commendation or citation, whatever it was. And then they were gonna send us to Japan. We were all classified as essential. And they were giving, and the man at Camp Atterbury says, oh no, says, you will be discharged, you're not going home recuperation period. Says, people, it says, we got soldiers coming in here, only 60 credits, and you guys got over 100. Says, you're gonna be discharged. But when he opened up our traveling orders, he said, no, you're right, you're going to Spokane, Washington. Yeah, so that was the extent of it, yeah. And a lot of the places, like I said, I don't remember the names of some of the towns, like Leghorn and Florence, and some of the places I remember, and Rome. But a lot of the little towns we went through, you know, and wherever we stopped, I mean, it was out in the field, and we would tear up their vineyards and build a landing strip with the pierced planking and all. Yeah, and at the airport at Rome, had to pull off a 1,000-pound bomb that didn't explode. It was a dud. Had to pull that off. So yeah. So some of the things were kind of rough, but it wasn't bad as a lot of them had. Yeah. So, and then, like I said, they sent us to Corsica, and we went there, and we were training, and some of us went to a little little rest area up there at Ajaccio. It was a little resort that the French used. And then the doctor said that he didn't think we should go into France. So when our battalion commander got back from Naples, he was disappointed because he wanted to go in. He wanted to go into France, but they got another outfit to go. And then he was more disappointed when when he found out there was no opposition. Yeah, into Marseille, France. So that's about the extent of it. And then we started back from Leghorn, near Pisa, where the Leaning Tower was, yeah. Started back, and we took our time coming back. Went to Foggia, and the thing was, they were clearing the air base because war was winding down already, and they were burning a lot of the stuff. Brand new uniforms and everything else. And the people were out there, they were begging for the clothes they didn't have, yeah. And so it made you feel bad, yeah. So we came all the way back down to Straits of Messina, down to Calabria, and what did I say? That's where we got aboard ship. Brindisi, yeah. And I think that's where we were when the fighting was over with in Europe. The war was over with. We were waiting for a ship, and we got on the American ship that was supposed to be the largest U.S. passenger, the USS America. Yeah, we come there, and we come through stormy waters. Back, we landed in Boston, and then scattered to our different homes, yeah, for a 30-day recuperation period, and wound up back in the Army in Spokane, Washington. That's where we were transferred into the Air Force. Yeah. So that was the extent of it. I don't know whether I missed anything or not.
While you were in Italy, did you have any contact with the civilians?
Yeah, at times we did, yeah. Especially when we were in a staging area, we could get into town, you know. And that's where I bought some of the postcards that I have, you know. I had brought postcards back that had never been mailed. I got them from Rome, in Africa, in different places there in Italy.
Did you try some of the Italian foods and the wine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were in the staging area there, just outside of Naples, I think near Santa Maria. And we went into Naples and we wanted to get some good food. So this one little boy come around there, and of course we had one of the fellows that I was with, I think there were 4 of us, he spoke Italian. So he asked the boy, he says, do you know a good restaurant where we could get some meat? And he says, yeah. So he took us up to a place, it was called a cave. And the proprietor came out, and the fella asked him if he had any meat, you know, that he could give us some steaks. He says, oh yeah. He says, I give you steak. So after we ate the steak and all, he said, how come you're the only one that could have meat? He says, the other restaurants don't have it. He says, well, he says, my American friends, the soldiers, he says, they drive the big trucks, and he says, the man goes down the street with a donkey, the truck hits the donkey, you get the steak.
How was the wine?
Pardon?
How was the wine?
Wine was good. We had good wine in Italy. We had some in Africa, but we had what they call purple death in Africa, and it would turn your lips purple. But you know, water was so scarce that sometimes we had to drink the wine in order to get a little bit of, you know, quench our thirst a little bit. But it would turn your lips purple, you know, and they called it purple death. So that was in Italy we could get, and we even in Africa, I think we paid two lira for a canteen cup full of wine. Now, that was a lot of wine, you know, canteen cup full. And we didn't realize that sometimes you get pretty high on that stuff before you even know it. And only 2 liras, that's 2 cents is all that's all we paid for it. And in Italy, I think it cost us just a little more, but the wine was a little better, I think, in Italy. And we also had, what was that other stuff they could come up with that they made over there? We called it white lightning. I can't think of it.
How about the grappa? Did you have any of the grappa?
No, no, but it was exciting. You know, some of the things were, some of them weren't so good, yeah.
I know most of the time you spent in combat, but did you ever have the opportunity to see any of the USO shows?
The US what?
The USO shows.
Oh, no. Not when we were in combat, but when we were getting ready, you know, in a staging area or something, we had a chance to see some of them, yeah. Not too many. We didn't get to see too many.
Any of the named performers like Jack Benny or Bob Hope?
No, I didn't get to see any of them. We went to regular Italian opera over there in a regular opera house, yeah. And the thing was, it was kind of embarrassing because a lot of the fellas weren't they didn't take too kindly to that kind of entertainment. So they booed some of the, you know, the singers, and they wanted hillbilly music. They didn't want to hear opera. They didn't understand it, and to them it wasn't worth going there. But to me, it was interesting, you know. Yeah, and it was just things like that. And we watched a soccer game between the Italian and the British soccer team, the military soccer team, yeah, which was very boring, yeah, because all they were doing running around the field and nobody was scoring or anything, so it was boring. And all that, but there were some sites that were pretty good. Like I had a chance to take even when we were down near Oran, they had the bathhouses, you know, and you could go in there and take a bath, and you had people in there that were helping you to get cleaned up, you know. So that was different, and even the toilets were different in Oran. They just had a stream of water running down the building, and they had 2 footprints that you just squatted on, and that was it. And they had a young girl that come in and sell you toilet paper for a penny or 2, yeah. So it was all. And the one place just right at the outskirts of the desert, we run into a place that had the aqueduct. Part of the aqueduct was still up, and there was a bathhouse, and it was nice. Had a nice big tub in there, you know, and everything was abandoned. There was nobody else around, and so I had a nice warm bath in there, spring water flowing in. I don't know, there was no sign of a volcano or anything, but warm water come flowing in from the mountainside. Yeah, so that was nice, and it was made of marble. So, and no village around or anything, just a little bathhouse. So it was things like that. And there were a lot of places in Italy that were very interesting. I went through Rome 3 times, but I never got to stop, you know. Always had to move right on through, yeah. So I missed that. That was our bad part, because we were always on the move, yeah. And the only place that we really stopped for any length of time with any civilians was up near Leghorn. There was an air base when they had stalemate up at the Po Valley. We got to talk to some of the natives there, but outside of that, we didn't have too much contact. We were always on the move, yeah.
You were telling us before about somebody who built a still.
The-
Somebody in your company who built a still.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where was that? And
That
can you
was
tell
at
us
the
about that?
Anzio beachhead. He built it in the revetment. And then up near the front where we were, this other guy, he was from Kentucky. And he decided that he was gonna get him a still and make some moonshine too, up for the ones that, up for us that were up front there. And he did. And when he was running it off, the still exploded and it burned him. So he went to the hospital. And when the major came through passing out Purple Hearts, he was all bandaged up, you know, just his eyes and his mouth. The only thing, and the major wasn't asking anybody any questions or anything. He was just throwing Purple Hearts on the bunks. So he got a Purple Heart. And when he got back to the outfit, the administration officer was going to court-martial him. But when he found out that he got a Purple Heart, he couldn't court-martial him. Okay, he got those big cans of green beans and corn, and we used to get a lot of the Lifesaver candy, so he used that for sugar and all, yeah. And that's what he used for mash. And there, this Ernie Pyle, that used to be a news reporter, I guess he came there a couple of times, and he thought it was pretty good moonshine, yeah. And one of the generals, when he came up there to visit, you know, that was back near the shore, so it was pretty much out of rifle range and all. So the general come over there, and he'd always want a little bit of that moonshine, and he brought him up regular U.S. whiskey that he got from Naples. Yeah, I'll give you this for your moonshine. Yeah.
That was a good exchange.
Yeah, he liked it. Yeah, that's the way it was. Yeah, and I was trying to think of what that other,
Bad hangover from that homemade stuff?
huh?
Was that a bad hangover from drinking some of that homemade booze?
I don't know, I just had a little bit, because the guy that run it off, I knew him pretty well, you know, before we went over there to the beachhead. And so he called me over, I didn't even know he had it. He said, "Come on over here, Paul." He said, "I got something for you." And he had this jar on there running it off. It was pretty good, yeah. I didn't drink too much of it though. So, yeah, it was pretty strong, you know, it wasn't cut or anything, you know. So it worked out pretty good. Yeah, glad to get off of there. And we got into Rome the same day that they had D-Day in France, you know, when they invaded from England. Yeah. So that we didn't get too much requisition for going into. Yeah. So that's about the extent of it. I don't know.
When you came back and you were discharged, did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
No, I wanted to take air conditioning and refrigeration, and everything was filled up. And a lot of schools, they did not even teach that. And well, this buddy of mine talked me into it, you know. So the one principal of the one school, he says, "How did you like military?" And we both said, "Well, in peacetime, it wouldn't be bad." And my buddy, he was in the infantry. He was in Big Red 1, I think it was. So he says, "Yeah," he says, "I wouldn't mind it." And I says, I wouldn't mind it either. So he said, "Well, you can take it up if you go back into the military." So he enlisted for 3 years, and another buddy of mine, he enlisted for 3 years. And I had a girlfriend, and I didn't want to enlist for 3 years. So I enlisted for 18 months, and that's where I made a mistake. Yeah. And then my dad passed away, and my mother didn't want me out of the country because I was sent up to the Arctic Circle up at Fort Churchill. And I was up there from January to, till just about Thanksgiving Day, just before Thanksgiving, because that's when my dad passed away. I was on my way home we were on our way back from the north, and they couldn't get a hold of me. And we got down to Mojave Desert, and I got a B-29 out of Tucson, Arizona, to Andrews Air Base. And everything was fogged in, so I got home 2 hours after my dad passed, so I missed him, yeah.
They took you from Churchill in the Arctic Circle down to the Mojave Desert.
Yeah,
That's kind of, you know,
yeah,
a little.
it was, yeah, because we had to get, be accustomed to that.
Yeah.
Our blood, you know, had to get thinned out or thickened up or something. Yeah, we just laid around for, I think almost 2 weeks before we could really get around. The only one that was active, one of the fellas brought one of the husky dogs down, and that dog just went wild. Yeah. But the rest of us, we just laid around with our shorts, and they had air conditioners at each end of the barracks, and so we took it easy for a while. Yeah.
When you were discharged, did you take advantage of the 52 Twin Club, or was that?
Yeah, I took advantage of it because I looked for a job, really, and I didn't want to go back to the store because before the war, when I worked there, I was only getting $15 a week, working 6 days a week. So I figured, hey, you know, I put in to go to Guam because they needed heavy equipment operators. And so I operated a shovel and a crane and a bulldozer, and we could go over there, you know, the government would pay your expense, and then you could put in all the time you wanted, and you didn't have to pay any tax on that. So they were paying pretty good. I forget just exactly what it was. At that time it was, I think, around close to $4 an hour. And you could put in all the overtime you want. But excuse me, the two fellas that signed up to go with me, they backed out. I mean, I was gonna go with them. And they backed out, and when they backed out, I said, well, I wasn't gonna go either. And so I didn't wanna go to the store, and I didn't wanna go to the coal mine, which I could have had a job at the coal mine. But I used to deliver some of the products to the coal mine that they needed up there, like the powder and some of the blasting caps and stuff, you know. So I was inside a coal mine just a short ways, and I didn't want any part of that. So my sister was living up here, and so I came up here. I got my discharge in San Pedro, California, Fort MacArthur, you know, in 1948 on my birthday. Yep. So I stayed home about 5 months, and I came up here, got a job at Briggs Manufacturing, and then Chrysler took over Briggs, yeah. So from the time that I worked Chrysler and I got laid off, I got a job at Hifko truck, you know, the snub-nose milk truck that they used to deliver milk. And they said that all the time they were there, they never went on strike, never had any problem. So I figured, well, I'll just stay with them. Well, I worked with them 8 years, 8.5 years, and they finally sold out. So Chrysler called me, wanted to know if I was working. I said, no. They said, well, you want to come back to Chrysler? And I said, okay, I'll be glad to. So I got back to Chrysler. Yeah, that was it. And I retired with only 25 years with Chrysler. I was 63. My wife came down with cancer, and she had to be taken in for chemotherapy every day and all. So I had to retire, take care of her, and that was it. So I was lucky to give back at Chrysler. At least I got a little pension and all from them, you know, and a little bit of insurance, you know. Outside of that, I wouldn't have had much. I worked for Hifko for 8.5 years. I think I got $16.80 a month for a pension from letting me out. So So that was the part of my life, yeah.
Did
And then
you join any veterans organizations
I
when you
did.
got back?
I did, you know, and I joined the American Legion, and I think I joined them 3 or 4 different times. But the only thing they done is drink beer, you know, you go over there and I wasn't a beer drinker. I mean, I didn't care for that. And the wife, she didn't care to go, so I said, what am I going over there for? I just go over there, drink beer, and I get nothing out of it, so I dropped them, yeah. And I figured, hey, if I joined the veterans, it would be the same thing, you know. And then I was gonna join the veteran club over at Chrysler. And my wife says I should get the medals that I had come. And she thought I had a whole bunch of medals. So anyway, I said, well, I'll contact the guy, you know, from the veterans over there at Chrysler. So he took all the information and everything. He says, well, it'll take about 2 years before you get it. He says, they're pretty slow at getting it. So, and then he says, okay, he says, $15. I says, what for? He says, well, $15. I says, forget it. I says, I don't need the medals that bad, you know. But then I got to thinking about it. The wife wanted the medals. So I went over to see Senator, what's his name?
Levin.
Senator Levin. And he wasn't in, but his secretary was. And I had cancer of the prostate, and I had heart attack. And I guess the wife figured I wasn't going to last too long, so she wanted the medals. And I went over there and I told him what was what then. And he says, okay. He says, you'll have them in about 4 or 5 weeks. I says, 4 or 5 weeks? I says, the guy told me it would take about 2 years. He says, no. He said, we'll get them for you. So I got them upstairs. So I got the medals, and I got the American Defense, which instead of 3, I got 4 medals. And I got I got 5 little stars for combat. And the one, instead of 5 stars, they give you an arrowhead and the 2 stars. But they're so small, the size of a match head, you know, on your campaign. And I got the Presidential Citation, but that's all. Yeah. And the thing was that I did work up my way to T4 after I re-enlisted. You know, they didn't even give me my little corporal rating, but I worked my way up to a T4, and couldn't find any T4 patches. So there was a little sergeant patch there, and the wife says, why don't you get that little sergeant patch and use that? So I just put it in a big envelope, you know, and one day the one lady, she was, we were talking about different badges and all medals. So she says, give me that brown envelope you get there. So she took the whole thing and she encased it in one of those cases, you know. And I didn't know, but she put in that sergeant stripes, and that wasn't it, and I couldn't find any T4s. So I told my son, I think it was about, maybe a year ago, he's gets around, he goes, he makes house calls on TVs, repairs TVs and other electronic stuff. So I said, you get around quite a bit. I said, see if you can find me a T4 badge somewhere, or a patch somewhere. So he got on a computer, and you know where he had to go to get those, they had to come all the way from Wales, the British Isles, to get, he couldn't get them anywhere here in the States. Had to get them from Wales. So I got them up there in an envelope. And I never did correct that, the patch that they got in the case there. And she put all my overseas ribbon. I had some extras, and she put them all in there. Didn't ask me, you know, what she should put in. She just put everything in there. And I never did take it apart to try to correct it. So it's still sitting up there, hanging on a wall. And nobody's seen it but the family.
You got the pre-Pearl Harbor medal too. Wasn't there a special medal that they gave to the fellows that were in the service before the bombing at Pearl Harbor?
No, I didn't get that, I didn't get one of those, no.
That's still available from the Veterans Administration. If you
Oh, is
apply
that
for it,
right?
you can get it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No, I get the one for after the war, for the American defense.
Right.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the same one.
No,
No. Oh, I didn't know that, yeah.
so that would be another one that you can add to your collection.
Yeah. Yeah,
You have your passport there?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. See, we had blue denims at the time, we didn't get all.
That's
all
a military passport?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why don't you hold it up and he'll zoom in on it.
Let's see if I get that. It's kind of blurry, but, you know, from,
It's got a few miles on it.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
You were a good interview. I didn't have to ask you any questions. You just gave me your whole history,
Well.
which was good.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for your service as part of the Greatest Generation. And
Yeah, but you know what, they turned me off, really. Maybe I shouldn't even tell you this. But you know, back in the 50s, I was working for Chrysler. And of course, I was raising a family. And I had 6 children. And I had my wife's younger brother. He was handicapped, he was living with us. And I had my stepdaughter, she from my wife's previous marriage. And I kind of a little bit of a cold or flu going around, and I had to take the kids to the doctor and all. So I was getting unemployment insurance. I think I was getting, what, $52 a week, I think, or something, which wasn't very much. But anyway, with the prescriptions and the doctor bill and everything, and I kind of got back on my house payment. So I went up to Mount Clemens, to the veterans, and I was sitting out there in the hallway, and there was a colored man there, and he wanted to know why I was there, and I told him, I said, I thought maybe, and my house payment was only $56 a month. So I says, I thought I'd come up, maybe get a house payment. I says, cause I can't make my house payment. So he said, oh, you get it, no problem. He says, I live in New York, but he said, I travel from New York to Detroit all the time. He said, they give me money, he says, whenever I wanna come, no problem. So I asked them for $56 for a house payment, and they turned me down. So I was a little bit against veterans there. Yeah, that made me feel kind of bad. So I lost my house, yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I tried, but didn't do any good. Maybe if I'd have brought my family up there, maybe they figured I wanted it for drugs or something, I don't know. But they turned me down, yeah. So that kind of made me feel bad about the veterans. And I think maybe that was the reason I didn't want to join too many veteran outfits, yeah. Yeah.
When you were in Italy, did your group take any prisoners?
Did we take any prisoners?
Yeah.
We didn't, no, but our officers did. They went to a certain island, I don't know, they mentioned the name of the island, and they took some prisoners. They didn't even put up a fight, they just surrendered, yeah. Yeah, outside of that island.
No, German prisoners?
Yeah.
Yeah, not Italians?
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there were German prisoners, I mean, German soldiers all over. Because even the Italians, I mean, they really weren't too interested in fighting. Even in Africa, they had to have the Germans in back of them to force them, because they didn't want to fight the Americans. And that's the way that was. They were forced to fight. So, yeah. And it was too bad that it turned out like that, yeah. Because, just like us, we had no reason to be over there fighting. You know, they didn't do anything to me or anybody else that I know of. But they had to fight us, just like that, just like the one, my wife's cousin. I mean, my second wife, she was Sicilian, and her cousin, he says I was hiding in the bushes. He says I didn't want to fight. He says the Americans didn't do nothing to me. So, yeah. So that's the way it was. War, it's funny. You gotta go and kill people that didn't even do anything to you, you know. Yeah. And you really don't know how many were killed or anything else, you know, in some of them. And we killed a lot of our own men over there. Even like we went into Sicily. We went in and the Germans came in that evening and they bombed quite a bit along the shoreline. So all the gunners were edgy. The ACAC guns, and we didn't have too many ACAC guns outside of 40 millimeter or 50 calibers. And so they were all edgy anyway. And here come a couple of transport planes with American paratroopers. And the guys opened up on them, I think four transport planes. And they brought them all down, killed all those paratroopers. We killed our own paratroopers. So what are you gonna do, you know? That's just the way life was. Yeah, you take some of the guys, they were so excited, they had itchy fingers, and they see a plane coming. Just like one of my buddies, I mean, I could see no reason. They had a dogfight. The American planes got in amongst the enemy planes, and they were shooting at each other. They weren't much more than higher than that flagpole out there. And that's where they were, just about the distance from where we were. And they were shooting at each other, and of course some of the shells were hitting the ground around us, you know. But my buddy, he hopped on a 50 caliber rifle, 50 caliber gun, and he picked out a plane, and it was an American plane, and I yelled at him. I says, Woody, I says, that's an American plane. No, he shot at the American plane. Yeah. So there it was. And my sergeant yelled at me, he says, Paul, he says, get that 50 caliber going. I didn't want to get it going when I got over there, because I didn't, you know, when you get a bunch of planes, they're zigzagging around, and they're fighting for their life. And you're gonna go shooting, you don't know what you're shooting at. And so he says, get on that gun. Well, I got on the 50, but it wouldn't fire because they didn't have the head set up just right. So it wouldn't fire. So he gets on the gun, and he adjusts the head on right away, and he starts firing. And by that time, they were out of range anyway. But I know that my buddy brought down an American plane, because it was going right into the plane. I says, Woody, I says, that's an American plane you got there. Yeah. So what can you do? Yeah, and there were a lot of fights that way, you know, between the enemy planes and the American planes, and a lot of time we would set out and we could watch. We'd get out in the open, and we would watch the American dive bombers or fighter bombers come in and bomb the gun sites or the artillery pieces and all. And a lot of time at night we'd sit outside and watch the firefight, you know. All the guns going off and everything, the vehicles going up in fire and everything else. You could sit back and just watch, because it was over on the other side. And you could see the whole beachhead, you know. It was so small. So you could see from almost one end to the other if there was a firefight going on at night, yeah. You could just watch it. And the dive bombers we could watch because they're right up in front of us. And we saw a lot of planes that were shot down. Yeah, but, our big bombers. Yeah. One of them was shot down. One of the officers was very angry. He says, why did you lead us right into the ACAC fire? He says, you could have gone around. He was going to shoot him because Well, he didn't have much choice. I mean, you're in amongst a whole bunch of planes, you can only maneuver so much, you know. But he blamed on the navigator, I guess, for taking him through there, I don't know. And the one guy, I didn't see it happen, but he was brought down, and the plane was on fire. So the tail gunner was trapped in the plane, and the officer came out, and he knew that the man was going to be burned to death. So he took out his .45 and he shot the man. And part of the plane did not burn where the tail gunner was. So they got him for murder, yeah. And he thought he was helping his buddy. Yeah.
Did you ever have any problems sleeping after the war when you were home? Did you ever have any flashbacks or nightmares?
You know, I had nightmares, but I don't know why. I don't know what it was. My wife would tell me, she would wake me up, and I have no reason. I would sit up in bed, and I would start cussing somebody by the name of George. Now, whether that had anything to do with it or not, I don't know. And I never did cuss around the house or anything because, you know, I had the children there, and I never cussed in front of my children. And she said I would sit up in bed and I would get angry or something. And she said the man's name was George. So whether that had anything to do with being overseas, I don't know. But then I was spooked quite a bit. You know, I had, I don't know, I had a premonition, just like when I was up at the Arctic Circle. We were putting up a tent and it was cold. And we had the wind was blowing about 50 miles an hour. And we had the bottom hauled up, we had the floor in and the sides winterized, you know. And I was inside putting the stovepipe on this little round diesel burner that we had. And I had two guys up at the top. They were fastening the nose cone up there. You know, so the stovepipe wouldn't touch the canvas. And while I'm squatting there putting that stovepipe onto the stove, someone says, when you walk out of the tent, there's going to be a hatchet come down and hit you in the head. And, you know, I just nonchalantly got up, not even giving a thought. I got up and started out of the tent because I fastened the stovepipe onto the stove. And here come this hatchet and hit me in the head. I don't know when that happened. And so many times, even years afterwards, you know, I would have, like, I had a chair by the side of my bed. We just moved into this one house. And there was no carpet in the bedroom. So we had only lived there, I think, maybe a week or so. And I had an old chair from a cafe, you know, with a kind of a little web design, but it was wood. And I put it alongside of my bed, and in the nightstand, the wife had it on her side of the bed. So I put my trousers, you know, on the stool there, on the chair, and I carried a pretty good penknife in my pocket. And every time I put it on her, I could hear it plop on the chair, you know. So this one night I woke up, I heard this plop. I woke up and I thought, well, somebody picked up my trousers, and I wondered if they took my wallet, you know. So I reached over to get, and my trousers were okay, wallet was okay, the knife was in my pocket. So I started to lay back down, and just as I started to lay down, here out of the room I could hear click, clop, click, just like a little girl that would have her mother's high heel shoes on, you know, and go walking out the door, and that's what happened. No, I don't know. And I had those kind of things. And sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with heavy breathing right near my ear would wake me up, you know. And the one time I thought I felt somebody It was warm and I had my feet out from under the cover. So I felt somebody just like run their finger up the bottom of my foot, you know, woke me up. And I kind of raised up a little bit and I figured, oh, just a minute. But I laid back down and the same thing happened. So what happens? I don't know. So I said, what in God's name are you doing here? I said, you no longer belong here. I says, go where you belong. And that was it. But I used to be woke up that way quite a few times. Yeah. I could hear somebody come in the back door, and we lived in a quad level, and I could hear them coming up the stairs to the bedroom, where the bedrooms were, and I would call out. I said, Gary, is that you? Or Doug, is that you? Nobody answered. No, nobody was there. But I could hear them come and go. So whether that was part of the war, I don't know. Yep. And like I said, I think maybe the reason I made it back was because I obeyed my mother and dad when they asked me not to enlist, you know. So I had a lot of close calls. I was covered up bombs. I was covered up by shells that hit nearby. And the one time the sergeant says, "Come on, Paul, I'll take care of you. I'll take over, don't worry." I says, "I'm all right." He says, No, you can't be." He says, "Man, you were right in the middle of that." He says, "All that shrapnel and mud and dirt." He says, "I know you're hurt." I says, "No, I'm not hurt." So he couldn't believe it. I don't know how I got out of it. And so many times, you know, a guy would tell me, like I was sleeping in this one barracks there, right in front of the big door, the only available space that I could lay down and sleep. And the guy told me, he says, "Paul, it was a good thing you left there when you did." Said, "Man," he says, "you go down there now." He says, "the shell just tore it all up, right where you were sleeping." So I don't know.
A guardian angel watching over you.
Pardon?
You had a guardian angel watching you.
Could be, yeah. Could be, and I didn't know it, yeah. And he was the one, he told the guys in the Air Force outfit, he was transferred into it over there at Spokane before I was. He said, he told them, this one guy come up to me, and they nicknamed me Rip, because whenever I had a chance, you know, to take a break, I would lean up against a wall or a tree, and I'd just close my eyes and relax. While the other guys were all excited, you know, this and that. And so I'd be relaxed. And the guys said, "Oh, Red Van Winkle's sleeping again." So he said, "So you're Rip," this one guy did. He says, "You're Rip," and I says, "I guess so." He says, "Well, tell me one thing." He said, "Were you that brave or didn't you just give a damn?" And I says, "I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Well, the sergeant told me that you only had one speed, that no matter what happened, that you didn't get excited, you just had the one speed, you didn't run, you didn't panic or anything else." And that's why he used to take me with him. Well, the one time we went up, we didn't have too much ration. So they were shelling the quartermaster, and it was on a little piece of high ground. And the sergeant came up, he says, "Paul, see if you can find a vehicle." Said we'll go up and get some coffee and sugar, whatever we need, you know. So I went out and I got a truck, and we went up there, and everything was quiet. And we had some of the stuff put aside, ready to load up on a truck, and here they start shelling again. I jumped into a foxhole. I wasn't in there but about maybe 10 seconds or so, and here comes another guy, jumped into a foxhole. He looked at me and he says, "Paul." And I looked at him and I says, "Clenny." And here it was a kid that I used to pal around with when we were about 10 years old from my hometown. Yeah. But it was things like that that turned out, you know. And the one time, I went, had to go back down to Santa Maria near Naples to pick up some recruits, some new people, replacements. And we had about 2 hours to wait for them to process the men. So there was a little town there, and you know, a little shopping center. So me and a friend that I went down, Buddy, we went to do a little bit of window shopping. And here, coming around the corner, a guy's got his hand out, big smile on his face, you know. Yeah. Hey, Paul, you know. I looked at him, and he's a guy I was in a civilian conservation corps with, from my hometown, yeah. So it was just those things that happened that way. Now, whether, I don't know how that happened, but from a small town to meet two of my friends, you know, from my hometown. And the one that was just a kid, about 10 years old, they moved out of town, and I hadn't seen him in about, maybe 12 years or 13 years, something. And he recognized me right off the bat, yeah. So when he jumped in, he said, Paul. So that's the way things happen over there.
Well, we're about finished on the tape there, so. I guess that's,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a pleasure to have met you.
Nice meeting
You're
you.
part of the greatest generation,
Yeah.
and it was a pleasure. I didn't have to interview you, you just spoke through me. I couldn't ask you anything, and you just rolled it right along.
All right.
Thanks again.
Okay, so you think it was all right?
It was excellent.
Wonderful.
Okay.
One of the best.
As long as I done all right.
Told you
Yeah.
guys he should write a book.
Do what?
I
Yeah.
say you should write a book.
Oh.
I first
No.
told him, he goes, I don't have anything to say. And I'm like, oh,
No, it's very interesting.
he's had the life.
Yeah, the adventure was interesting too, but I'm glad it's over with. And I never thought I'd live this long, to tell you the truth. You know, after living in foxholes and out in the rain, the one time when we went into Salerno, it was I don't know, about the second night we were there, the first night we were up on a mountainside, and it started to pour down. But real heavy rain, thunder, lightning and everything. And I crawled under a old German trailer to keep dry, you know, because water was running pretty deep out on the mountainside yet. So I got out of the rain, and after it kind of eased up a little, I got out, and pretty soon everything turned red. The whole area just red. I was engulfed in nothing, and it was evidently clouds that I was in, and they were amplifying the redness. And I didn't know what happened. Was I hit or what, you know? And then it hit me that the lightning must have struck one of the barrage balloons that was over the ships that had brought us in, and that blaze, you know, just lightened up those clouds that way. And I didn't know what happened.